When a starship is torn apart during atmospheric entry, the laws of space travel say no one can survive. Every species in the galaxy knows this. Yet, after a catastrophic crash in the deep forests of the planet Xeria, investigators detect movement among the wreckage, impossible movement. Junior investigator Mara and her seasoned chief, Venks, are sent to confirm what should be unconfirmable. What they find defies not just survival statistics, but the very limits of biology, trust, and fear. This is the story of a human named James Lawrence, a being who treats the impossible as ordinary, who can survive where no one else could, and who sees potential friends in the deadliest creatures of an alien world. As Mara and Venks try to decide if this survivor is a miracle or a threat, the stakes grow far beyond one crash site. The deeper they look, the more they realize, the most dangerous thing about humans might be that they never stop rewriting the rules. Mara stared at the data streaming into her neural interface, the pale blue scales along her cheeks prickling in disbelief. Movement. There was movement in the wreckage. She leaned forward at her workstation in the Central Investigation Bureau's control floor, the glassy surface reflecting the cool green glow from the bioluminescent lights above. Outside the tower's reinforced windows, the Xalian capital glittered in the afternoon sun, unaware that something impossible was unfolding kilometers away. Chief Investigator, she began carefully, keeping her voice steady. You should see this. Across the room, Venks did not immediately respond. The tall, broad-frilled investigator's emerald scales had dulled with age, but his presence remained formidable. His vertical pupils narrowed slightly as his own neural feed updated, and Mara knew her superior was processing the same anomaly she was seeing. This is debris, he rumbled at last. Environmental interference. No, sir. Mara's frill twitched despite her effort to stay formal. Thermal imaging shows heat patterns, coordinated movement. Venks rose from his station and crossed to her, the faint scrape of his tail tip against the polished floor marking each step. He studied the feed, jaw tight. Catastrophic hull failure. Structural breaches in 17 locations. Life support destroyed on impact. 0% survival probability. 0.03, Mara corrected softly. That earned her a slow, dangerous look, not anger, but the kind of focus that warned her to tread carefully. You're saying this is a survivor? I'm saying we should check before we declare otherwise, she replied. If they're sentient, this could be a diplomatic nightmare if we ignore them. Venks's tail flicked once, the only sign she'd scored a point. Prepare 3 reconnaissance drones. We deploy in 15 minutes. The southern landing platform smelled faintly of ozone as their sleek atmospheric craft powered up. Mara loaded the drones into their launch cradle while Venks connected to the craft's neural interface, his frill pressed tight to his neck in concentration. Impact site is 173 kilometers south-southwest, she reported. Dense canopy, but the crash cleared a full kilometer radius. The craft rose smoothly, leaving behind the ordered grid of the city, the winding silver threads of agricultural rivers, and finally the green-black expanse of the ancient forest. Mara couldn't stop her pulse from quickening. Her first field assignment in 3 cycles, and it might already be history in the making. They saw the scar in the forest long before they reached it. From above, it looked like a wound, trees flattened outward, earth torn into ragged scars. The ship was a twisted heap of metal and composite shards, still sending thin columns of smoke into the sky. Catastrophic, Venks muttered again, scanning for confirmation of what they already knew. But Mara's eyes caught something. Near the debris' edge, the scattered fragments weren't random. They had been moved. Arranged. Sir, that clearing. Look at the pattern. Venks leaned closer to the feed, then tapped a command into his interface. Deploy Drone 2 to that sector. Full sensor sweep. The drone dropped from the cradle with a hiss, its anti-gravity pads whispering as it descended into the clearing. Mara linked to its feed, atmospheric composition, radiation traces, temperature readings. And then, her breath caught. Biological signature detected. Heat at 38.6 degrees. Venx's frill lifted in disbelief. Impossible. The thermal shock alone, it's moving, Mara interrupted. The drone's camera locked on. Through smoke and twisted metal, a bipedal figure shifted debris with deliberate, tool-assisted movements. Its motions were slow, but steady. Venx exhaled a low, ancient Zalian phrase, the kind usually reserved for temple ceremonies or the birth of a clutch. It survived. For a long moment, neither spoke. In all recorded history, nothing had ever survived an unshielded atmospheric breach on Zyria. Not a single living being. Venx was the first to recover. Deploy all remaining drones. Full perimeter surveillance. We observe before we engage. Mara nodded, but she couldn't pull her gaze from the moving figure. Injured, yes, but alive. Alive when every known law said it should be ash. The feed zoomed in, catching details, a damaged outer layer of what looked like synthetic fabric, bare skin beneath, pale and strange, eyes forward-facing, scanning the wreckage like a hunter mapping prey. "Do we approach?" she asked quietly. "Not yet." Venx's voice was iron. "We learn what it is before it learns about us." The drones fanned out, sensors sweeping the forest's edges. The figure paused once, looking directly at one of the hovering spheres. For a heartbeat, Mara thought it might attack. Instead, it raised an arm in a slow, deliberate motion. A signal? A greeting? Before they could decide, it turned and slipped into the wall of green beyond the crash site. The thermal reading struggled to keep pace, the dense canopy masking it almost completely. "It's headed deeper into the forest," Mara said. "Then it's heading toward danger," Venx replied grimly. "Shadowstalker territory begins less than 2 kilometers south." Mara's frill stiffened. "Apex predators, fast, silent, deadly. Even Zalian hunting parties avoided them." "Sir, if it runs into one, it dies," Venx finished flatly. "Or kills something it shouldn't. Either way, this just became a planetary risk." She glanced once more at the feed, tracking the faint heat trace. Moving fast. Moving like it had somewhere to go. Mara swallowed hard. "Sir, whatever that thing is, I think it's more capable than we're assuming." Venx didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on the data, the faint flicker of the impossible reading still pulsing on the map. "Prepare ground gear," he said finally. "We're going in." The crash site disappeared behind them as Venx guided the atmospheric craft lower, angling toward a small clearing on the forest's fringe. The engine's hum dropped to a low vibration that Mara felt through her feet, and the smell of damp earth began to filter into the cabin vents. She double-checked her field kit, scanner, translator, medical pack, then reached for the compact energy sidearm hanging at her belt. Venx noticed. "Minimal armament," he reminded her. "We're not here to fight it. Unless we have to." Mara nodded, though the reminder did little to ease the tension in her chest. The ancient forest was a predator's domain. If the figure from the crash had gone this way, it was heading into one of the most dangerous places on Zyria. The craft settled with a gentle thud in the clearing. Bioluminescent fungi glowed faintly in the shadowed undergrowth, and the air was thick with the musky scent of decaying vegetation. Above, the canopy swayed slowly, scattering fractured beams of sunlight down onto the forest floor. "Drones, perimeter sweep," Venx ordered. The 3 spherical machines drifted outward, their soft hums fading as they slipped between the towering trunks. Mara's neural interface filled with streaming data, temperature fluctuations, seismic vibrations, faint audio signatures of creatures moving far away. But one reading dominated the feed, the same anomalous biological signal from the crash. "Stronger now. Closer. It's still ahead of us," she said quietly. 200 meters, moving northeast." Venx motioned for her to follow. They moved in silence, their boots sinking slightly into the thick loam. The air was cooler here, but heavy with moisture. Strange insect calls pulsed from the shadows, and every so often, a distant crash of foliage reminded them they were not alone. Mara kept her focus on the heat trace. It was moving in bursts, short, rapid advances followed by pauses. Not random. Not panicked. The signal slowed, then stopped. Her stomach tightened. "Sir, it's waiting." Venx's frill twitched in acknowledgement. They slowed their pace, careful to make no sudden noise. Through the leaves, the shape emerged. The figure was crouched beside a fallen log, hands working with focused precision to lash together pieces of metallic debris. Mara saw now that the coverings it wore were scorched and torn, revealing sections of bare, strangely soft skin. It heard them. The head lifted, eyes locking on theirs, forward-facing, bright, alert. Mara's frill stiffened instinctively. It was like being studied by a predator. Then, the being spoke. The sound was filtered through a small, blinking device clipped near its neck, but the words were clear in her language. "I know you're not the ones who shot me down." Mara froze. This thing could speak to them. "You understand us?" The being gave a short nod. Translator. "Damaged in the crash. I fixed it." Its voice was low, steady. "Name's James Lawrence." Venx stepped forward, posture straight but unthreatening. "You are injured." "Nothing serious," James replied, standing now. Taller than she expected. Broad-shouldered, built for endurance. "Been worse." Mara's curiosity overcame protocol. "You survived an unshielded atmospheric breach." James shrugged, a strange, rolling gesture. "Not my first crash. Humans are adaptable." "Humans?" she echoed, recording the term in her neural interface. "Species name." "From a little blue planet a long way from here." Venx's frill tightened. "You ran from our drones. Why approach now?" "I needed to know if you were like them," James said simply. "The pirates. Same species as you. Different eyes, different way of moving. Hunters." Before Mara could respond, her neural interface flashed a red alert. "Large mass approaching. Fast." Venx hissed sharply. "Shadow Stalker. Close." Mara's pulse spiked. "We have to move." But James didn't. He turned toward the sound, his stance shifting, relaxed, almost curious. "You're not listening," Mara urged. "These things are apex predators," James finished calmly. "Yeah, I've seen them. This one's a friend." A crashing of branches, and the beast emerged. 7 meters from nose to tail, scales black as volcanic glass. Its bone blades extended in a lethal display, but its head was low, posture not aggressive. James made a series of clicking noises with his tongue. The predator froze, then rumbled, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated in Mara's chest. It stepped forward, and lowered its head against James's hand. Mara's brain refused the scene her eyes delivered. "That's impossible," she whispered. James smiled faintly. "That word doesn't mean much where I come from." Venx stayed silent, watching as the Shadow Stalker, a creature every Zalian child was taught to fear, leaned into the human's touch like a domesticated animal. "One eye," James said, tapping the creature's scarred socket. "We look out for each other. He keeps the smaller predators off my camp, I feed him now and then. Works out." Mara's scanner feed showed the beast's vitals, calm, steady. Not a trace of hunting adrenaline. Venx's frill flicked once. "You realize you've altered its behavior." James gave another one of those shrugs. "Guess so. Maybe it altered mine, too." The predator rumbled again, a sound so close to contentment that Mara felt the hairless skin of her arms prickle. Venx exhaled slowly. "Junior investigator. I think our mission parameters have just changed. Back at the crash site, the Zalian research camp was on high alert. The sight of a human casually walking beside a fully grown shadow stalker had rippled through the team like a shockwave. Venks ordered defensive positions but kept the weapons power down, signaling that for now, they were observers, not combatants. James stepped into the clearing, one eye pacing beside him like an oversized guard. The Predator's single good eye scanned every movement from the researchers, but there was no sign of aggression, only vigilance. Mara approached cautiously. You brought him here. Didn't seem fair to leave him hanging around the perimeter, James replied. Besides, you'd be surprised how good he is at keeping the curious wildlife away. I'm more surprised you're alive, Mara muttered, glancing at the towering beast. These creatures have killed fully armed patrols. James rested a hand on One Eye's neck, fingers brushing the edges of a bone blade. Maybe no one's given them a reason not to. Venks had been silent since their arrival. Now he stepped forward, his frill half extended in a mix of authority and restrained curiosity. You understand that this bond of yours is unprecedented. Our studies of shadow stalkers have always ended in blood. James gave a dry smile. Maybe you were doing the studying wrong. That earned a low ripple of amusement through the junior researchers watching from behind the perimeter shield. Mara felt her own frill twitch despite herself. There was something disarming about this human, a confidence that wasn't arrogance, a calm that didn't feel forced. But Venks's voice remained firm. This changes our situation. If you can influence one apex predator, you could influence others. That's a power most species would kill for. James shook his head. It's not about power. It's about respect. One Eye isn't a pet, and I'm not his master. We're partners. Equals. The predator rumbled at the sound of its name, the vibration thrumming through the ground. Over the next 3 days, Mara observed everything. James rebuilt parts of his camp with salvaged ship panels, incorporating natural materials with a skill that impressed even the engineering specialists. One Eye came and went freely, returning with kills that the humans sometimes cooked over a controlled fire. The strangest change, though, wasn't in James. It was in the forest. The motion sensors began picking up smaller predators avoiding the crash perimeter entirely. Pack hunters who once skirted the site now veered kilometers away. Even nocturnal flyers altered their flight paths. Mara presented the data to Venks in the command tent. It's him. Or rather, him and One Eye. They're reshaping predator territory patterns in real time. Venks's frill shifted uneasily. And if he leaves? Mara hesitated. I don't think the changes will reverse. They're learning. Venks's eyes narrowed. That makes this an ecological event. And ecological events can destabilize entire regions. The warning came just after midday. One of the drones picked up a large movement approaching from the north. Larger than One Eye. James had been repairing a panel when the alert came. One Eye froze, nostrils flaring, then positioned himself between James and the tree line. The forest parted, and a second shadow stalker stepped into the clearing. This one was bigger, darker, its scales absorbing the light. Bone blades extended in full threat display. Weapons came up across the camp. Nobody fire. James called sharply, already moving toward the newcomer. Mara's pulse spiked. James, stop, she's just nervous, he said over his shoulder. Let me handle it. The bigger predator locked eyes with him, muscles coiled to strike. James slowed his pace, making the same rhythmic clicking sounds Mara had heard before. The new shadow stalker hesitated. One Eye gave a low rumble, not aggression, but something almost coaxing. Minutes passed like hours. And then, slowly, the new predator's bone blades retracted. Its head lowered. James reached out, resting a hand against the black, cool surface of its scales. That's it, girl. You're safe. The researchers stared in stunned silence. I think I'll call her Nova, James said casually. Fits her color. Venks finally spoke, voice low and measured. You just formed a bond with a second apex predator in under 10 minutes. Like I said, James replied, respect goes a long way. Mara was still recording, every instinct telling her this was more than a field report. This was history. 2 shadow stalkers stood in the clearing, not as killers, but as guardians. And in their midst, a human who treated the impossible like routine. The Central Investigation Bureau's Emergency Committee chamber was silent except for the faint hum of neural projectors. Mara stood at the center, her field report displayed in vivid three-dimensional detail above the table, footage of James with one eye and Nova in the clearing. The predator's bone blades were retracted, their postures relaxed, both towering over the human who leaned casually against one eye's flank. As you can see, Mara said, keeping her tone steady, this is not a case of animal taming. This is a cross-species partnership. Behavioral shifts are already spreading through the local ecosystem. Administrator Lex, the oldest in the room, fixed her with a sharp gaze. 1 human. 2 weeks. And you're telling us predator territory lines have shifted? Yes, Mara confirmed. We've documented avoidance patterns in 5 separate species. Packs are relocating. Hunting grounds are changing. And these shadow stalkers, she gestured to the footage, are teaching others. They're not just adapting to him, they're adapting to his way of interacting with us. That, Lex said grimly, is precisely what concerns us. Later, back at the crash site, Mara found James kneeling in the dirt, sketching in it with a stick while One Eye and Nova lounged nearby. The marks formed diagrams, simple structures, lines of travel, predator range maps. You're mapping, she observed. James glanced up. Just figuring out where the packs are moving. Don't want them running into each other too much. Cuts down on fights. You realize our top predators have never altered territory patterns this quickly, Mara said, stepping closer. You've changed their behavior permanently. James shrugged. We've changed each other's behavior. They trust me. I trust them. That's the deal. Most species would call that power, she said carefully. He looked at her, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. Where I come from, we call it friendship. That night, while the forest hummed with distant life, the sensors blared another proximity warning. But this time, it wasn't a predator. A ship had entered low orbit. Venks's voice was tight when he called Mara to the command tent. Unregistered human vessel. No prior contact. They're here for him. Mara's frill tightened. Rescue team. Likely, Venks said. But the Bureau wants him off-world as soon as possible. Too many changes happening here. Morning brought the first sight of the human ship. Sleek, silver, and utterly alien against the forest backdrop, it descended without the usual roar of atmospheric entry, as if it bent the air around it. It settled in the clearing with perfect precision. From the ramp emerged another human, taller than James but carrying himself with the same easy confidence. Captain Nolan, James said, grinning. Right on time. Nolan's eyes flicked to One Eye and Nova, but if he was surprised by the sight of 2 apex predators lounging like domesticated animals, he didn't show it. Only you could crash land on an unknown world and make friends with the local monsters. They're not monsters, James corrected. They're brilliant. And I'm not leaving them here. Venks's frill rose in disbelief. You intend to take them with you? Leaving them would be dangerous, James said simply. For them and for you. They've learned too much. They'd try to approach others, maybe ones who don't understand. Mara watched as James and Nolan discussed modifications to the ship's cargo hold, converting it into a habitat. She felt an unexpected ache in her chest. You're really going, she said quietly when she caught him alone. James smiled, not a grin, but something warmer. I don't stay in one place long. But I won't forget this one. By late afternoon, One-Eye and Nova were aboard, resting in a compartment that looked impossibly well suited to them. James lingered at the ramp, his gaze sweeping over the camp, the forest, the people who had watched him turn their understanding of the possible inside out. "Thank you," he said to Venks and Mara. "For giving me time. For not trying to put me in a box." Mara's frill rippled faintly. "Will we see you again?" James's grin returned. Humans have a way of showing up where they're least expected. The ship rose silently, breaking through the canopy without disturbing a single leaf. Mara stood in the settling light, watching it vanish into the sky. The forest around her seemed quieter, yet somehow fuller, as if the impossible had left a permanent echo behind. Venks came to stand beside her. "Well, junior investigator," he said, "how do we report this without sounding insane?" She thought for a long moment, then answered, "We start with the truth. We thought no one could survive the crash, until we saw the human." The forest felt different without James in it. 3 days had passed since the human ship vanished into the sky, and yet Mara could still sense the change in the air. It wasn't just the absence of his tall, strange figure or the 2 predators who had followed him everywhere, it was the way the ancient forest itself seemed to pause. She stood at the perimeter of the now quiet crash site, her boots sinking into the churned soil. Drones still patrolled lazily overhead, their feeds mostly empty. No heat traces. No flickers of movement that hinted at human cunning. Venks approached, his heavy steps muffled by the moss. "The Bureau received our final report," he said. "They want us back at headquarters." "They're not satisfied with our conclusions," Mara guessed. "They think we've been affected," Venks admitted. His frill shifted in mild irritation. "They say our descriptions of human capability are exaggerated. They think the footage could have been staged." Mara felt her frill tighten in disbelief. "Staged? Sir, you saw him. You saw them." "Yes," Venks said. His gaze swept the clearing. "And I think that's the problem. The people in the capital haven't. They can't imagine it. It doesn't fit in their reality, so they choose not to believe." She thought of One-Eye lowering his head for James to scratch behind the bone blades. She thought of Nova, the most dangerous predator in these forests, rumbling like a docile companion. She thought of the way James had spoken of respect instead of dominance, of partnership instead of control. And she thought of his words before leaving, "Humans have a way of showing up where they're least expected." Her neural interface pinged softly, a private message packet. No origin tag. No official routing. Just coordinates. "Sir," she said slowly, "do you see this?" Venks's frill rippled once as he checked his own feed. "I do. That location is far outside our normal patrol zone." "It's on the other side of the continent," Mara confirmed. "Deep wilderness. No settlements. No known research outposts." Venks's eyes narrowed. "You think it's him?" "It's encrypted in a human format," Mara said. "Who else would send that?" He studied her for a long moment. "You understand that following it would be unofficial?" Mara nodded. "And potentially career-ending." A slow flicker of something, amusement, pride, passed through Venks's gaze. "Prep the craft." The flight was long, the forest beneath them shifting from lush green to darker, older growth. These were places even Zalians rarely ventured, places where the canopy was so thick the sunlight barely touched the ground. They landed in a small clearing ringed with trees so wide it would take 10 people holding hands to encircle them. The air here was different, sharper, filled with the scent of unfamiliar blooms. Mara scanned the undergrowth, heart thudding. No movement. No heat trace. Venks tilted his head toward a fallen log near the center of the clearing. Something metallic gleamed beneath it. They crossed carefully. It was a container, human in design, compact, sealed against weather. Mara crouched and brushed away the dirt. Her fingers found a release latch. The lid hissed open. Inside was a small device. A recording unit. She activated it. James's voice filled the clearing. If you're hearing this, you followed the coordinates. Guess that means you're the kind of people who can't leave a mystery alone. I figured you'd want to know. One Eye and Nova are settling in just fine. We're on another world now, one that has its own predators that could teach yours a thing or two. And before you ask, yes, they're adapting. So am I. There was a pause, then a low, familiar rumble in the background, One Eye's voice. Nova's joined it a moment later. James spoke again, softer this time. I don't know if the Bureau will believe you when you tell them what you saw. That's okay. The important thing is you believe it. Keep an open mind, Mara. The universe is a lot bigger, and stranger, than your textbooks say. The recording clicked off. Mara sat back on her heels, staring at the small device. He knew we'd come. Venks gave a slow nod. He understands us better than we understand him. They sealed the container and carried it back to the craft. Neither spoke during the flight home, but Mara's mind was full, not of reports or data sets, but of possibilities. She realized then that James had left more than just an ecological ripple in the ancient forest. He'd left an idea, one that was far more dangerous than any predator. The idea that, impossible, was just another word for, not yet seen. In the Bureau's report archive, Mara would file their experience under First Contact, class anomalous. She would note the environmental shifts, the behavioral changes in apex predators, the unexpected survival of a human in conditions deemed unsurvivable. But privately, in her own secure logs, she would write something simpler: we thought no one could survive the crash, until we saw the human. And after seeing him, I am no longer certain what it means to survive. The ancient forest would heal. The scar from the crash would fade. But in the deep canopy, packs of shadow stalkers now moved differently, scanning the trees with a new awareness. And sometimes, at dusk, the researchers swore they could hear a strange sound, a soft, rhythmic clicking, drifting on the wind. Mara never told them she smiled every time she heard it. Because somewhere out there, James Lawrence was still rewriting the rules. And she had no doubt that the next time the impossible happened, it would have a human at its center.